When I was small there for my 8-9 years, my uncle appeared one day at home with a puppet from Bartolo. He said he found in a sale of old items near the market and paid very cheap. I had not even asked, but he brought, saying that it seemed to me all boccichudo and kind of strange. My Aunt Ryu said that the puppet was ugly, that only the demon. But I liked that time. We didn't have much fun. Lived in a simple house in a neighborhood isolated from these clay roads that saw mud when it rains. My toys were limited, so any news already. It was a source of celebration. The puppet was a big kind of heavy and had a vinyl face that I tried to smile, but stayed in a bizarre middle ground between content and scary. The body was cloth and the hair. Yes, a wig of thick strands. Everyone read it on the first night. I put him in the chair near the bed and slept without a problem. But at the time of dawn, I woke up. I don't know, for the room was dark, just one beam of clarity. Of the street entered the crack of the curtain. I felt a strange chill ice rising slowly by the spine. My eye went straight to Chair the puppet. It was still there, but it seemed different. I don't know. Maybe it was effect of the shadows of the low light, but his eyes seemed more backward, half twisted. I felt a weird discomfort, a desire to turn to the other side and pretend I saw nothing. But before moving a muscle, I heard a low sound, almost I whisper, that noise that we make when it speaks without opening our mouths. Well, I could decipher the words, but came from the direction of the chair. I froze. The fear arrested my body on the mattress. My heart began to throb so strong that I thought I would wake up everyone I was there, paralyzed, trying to hear better. But there was only silence. I remained a long time, agreed, without the courage to face again, until I fell asleep. Tiredness in the morning with the light entering the room. The puppet seemed normal. Laugh at me. Even I should have dreamed, or my head was fooling myself. He shook, squeezed to see if there was no internal mechanisms. Anything followed, but in that night again, and in the following, also the same thing. And the puppet whispered at night on the third night. I was already sleeping with the sheet pulled to the nose, trying to ignore the bad feeling that puppet gave me. I wanted to believe it was all imagination, but when I woke up again, in the silence of dawn, I was sure, because the whisper came clearer. It looked like a poorly articulated babble, like someone talking very softly, dragging the syllables unintentionally to be understood. I was lit in the dark, feeling the chest squeezed. There was no doubt I was hearing that the noise came from the chair where the puppet was. The fear was so much that I didn't even think I jumped out of bed. I grabbed that business and shot into the wardrobe by knocking the door with violence, so I ran back to bed and stuck my face on the tremendous pillow from head to foot. I passed the rest of the night awakening, watching that wardrobe, waiting for something to happen. But nothing happened. In the morning, when my aunt came to call me to go to school, I opened the closet slowly, with trembling hands. The puppet was thrown there in a corner, with his face turned to me. It seemed like before, but I knew who wasn't. That this boy? My aunt asked, seeing my expression. Nothing. Not she. He looked at the puppet that was not liked. I wanted to say that. I did not want to beg, to get rid of it. But something contained me, perhaps fear of looking cowardly. Maybe I am afraid that if I said something he heard. I left him there inside the closet and went to class. But when I came back, the puppet was no longer there. I froze, wardrobe all checked, under the bed, on the shelf, everywhere. Nothing. My heart hammered inside my chest until I went to the kitchen and saw it sitting in the chair of the table. My aunt looked at me and laughed. Okay, dropped in the closet. That not even a burden I got and put there. I wanted. Say. Something say. I didn't take him out of there. But no, nothing left. I just looked at the puppet, and in that second, I swear on the stars, I saw his mouth moving was fast. A short minimum movement, but I saw my breath stopped for a moment. The heart fired, waiting for my aunt to realize too, but she didn't notice. Want to eat? I'll make coffee. She turned her back and went to the stove. I kept staring at the cold sweat on my back. The puppet, I was stopped as always. But I knew it wasn't just a toy. Anyone that night, I stuck the puppet again in the wardrobe. I pushed deep down under clothes and closed the door firm. But at dawn I woke up with a sound a tech, as if something had plummeted. On the floor I sat on the bed, my heart already in the mouth. The room was dark, but it gave. To see a silhouette in the middle of the floor was the puppet he had left the wardrobe, or rather it had been taken from there, that shivered me completely, because the door of the cabinet was still closed. And I was sure no one had entered the room. I stayed there for a while, acting looking at that thing thrown on the floor, and then came the whisper again. This time nearby, the sound cut the silence of the soft room, wrapped as a voice that does not want to be heard. But I understood a part, was my name. The puppet whispered my name. I never felt such dread in life. I shrunk on the bed. I pulled the sheet covering my head and closed my eyes with all the strength begging to wake up for it. To be just a nightmare. I was there tremendous, trying to ignore the noise. But the whisper was still low, persistent as a dark wind passing through my ear. I did not preach my eye until the first sun sign in the morning. I jumped out of bed and went to tell my aunt that, "That's it, boy, is inventing silly. Aunt plays out this puppet, please," she snorted. "Boy, I already said that. If you continue with these inventions, I end in it. Even ready, aunt, for everything that is sacred plays." She snorted and grabbed the puppet from the floor. "Beauty, I'll put on the dump. But if you later crying saying that he wants him back, don't come to me with Kororo. Understood?" I didn't go cry. I just wanted that thing away from me. I saw my aunt out with the puppet and put in a trash bag outside. I felt such a great relief that almost I cried. I spent all day well. Finally went to sleep quietly. But that night when I woke up at dawn, the puppet was back sitting in the chair of my room, staring at me. The moment my eyes hit him, my whole body paralyzed, a cold rose down the spine and my stomach even wrapped. I could not pull the right air my aunt had thrown away. I saw with my own eyes how he was there again. The whisper came again, soft, soft. But this time I understood. I saw the O. And the voice was dragged as if it came from a very distant place, but it didn't come from him. I couldn't support. I jumped off the bed screaming. I ran to my uncle's room, and I hit desperate Aunt. He came back awakened, scared what there was. "Boy is crazy, the puppet, aunt. He is there in mine room." My uncle lit the lamp, grumbling, "That puppet, boy. Then you're talking." I just managed to point to my room. My aunt sighed up and went there with me, clinging to the bar of the jersey. My uncle came after, scratching her head when she rose the lamp. The puppet was no longer there. The chair I was empty. My uncle stared at me with irritation. Arrives from my aunt, shouted. "First, says that the puppet speaks after. It comes from the trash already gave. But I swear, aunt, he was here." My uncle shook his head. "Goes to sleep, kid, and stop watching these strange things on TV." I tried to argue, but it is no use. They came back to the room, leaving me there just shivering with fear. I looked around, waiting for the puppet to appear again, but did not give the guys. And that scared me even more in the morning. My aunt confirmed that the garbage bag was still outside and the puppet was still inside it. But I knew the truth. That night I slept with the lamp lit, and at dawn I woke up again. But this time I didn't hear murmurs. I heard laughs. Stuffy there, bedroom corner. I didn't want to see. I continued shrunken by praying for that to disappear, but did not disappear for 3 nights in a row. I woke up listening to that laugh, until Wednesday. My aunt found me shrunken under the bed tremendously with the blanket stuck in the mouth. So as not to scream was when she started to believe in. The next day my aunt called a neighbor, who understood prayers and prayers. The woman entered my room, looked everything, and made a scared expression. "Has something heavy here." My aunt almost collapsed. The woman had the puppet burn, warned that if he threw away I would return, was what we did. My uncle set him on fire in the yard. I swear that as the flames grew, I heard a last, weak whisper like a wind sharp next to my ear. But I heard, and it doesn't end here, later of that night. I never heard noises, never saw anything, but today, every time I hear a whisper out of nowhere, I feel that shiver, and I'm afraid to look back. If you arrived here, let your thumbs up, subscribe, and comment from where you. It was a humble home, but full of things, had some wooden furniture. Heavy old and a smell of dust that never left the house. was at the end of a village far from the city. Then it was not normal to see someone there, not that I called the truth. I liked the peace of that silence intertwined only by the sound of the leaves moving with the wind. Except that we get used to silence and begins to perceive other things, and that is what happened. I was about 12 years old, so my aunt had given me a doll from Gal, those plastic with a colorful dress, loose hair, and happy child's face that appears in the commercials. I never enjoyed much dolls. But my aunt insisted that everyone my age was one. Then there she was placed in my corner on top of a shelf in the room I divided with my cousin. At first the doll was just another object, but soon I started to notice that there was something wrong. I was very quiet and passed the afternoons reading or drawing, then everything was silent. At first I didn't notice. I looked at the doll and always saw the same expression, a silly smile and big eyes, as if just stared at me. But gradually things began to change. The first indication, the small but noticeable smile. I didn't know if I was imagining, but when I looked again, I saw that she seemed to have a slightly more evil smile bothered. But as it was just a doll, I thought it was my mind. But the smile was not the worst. What really scared it was when I noticed that her eyes seemed to accompany me. Not literally clear the doll, I was still fixed, looking forward. But sometimes when I was in my corner reading or drawing, gave a kind of chill in the air. Was as if her eyes moved, as if she was watching me at the beginning. I was looking for a logical explanation. It must be the reflecting light, must be the angle. But something inside me said that was not, that I started to feel uncomfortable sometimes. When I went through the room and saw the doll on the shelf, her gaze seemed more fixed, more prescience. I no longer liked to go to my room at night, but as a child I had nowhere to escape. My cousin didn't care to. Her doll was always more disconnected, but I was already convinced that I was not. More alone. I remember one night, when the house was in complete silence, I was in bed without being able to sleep. The eyes of doll that night seemed to watch me even more. Intensely, I was sure it was paranoia, but I felt that the time was being observed. I got up at dawn just to check the doll was still on the shelf with the same silly smile and eyes turned to the door. But that night something was different. The smile was bigger, stranger, and the eyes looked more alive, almost attentive, as if they could really see me peeking me. I couldn't go back to sleep. That night the feeling of being watched was terrible. During the dawn I could only hear the creak of the wood of the house and the wind beating window. But what occupied my ears was my own breath and the muffled sound of my heart, just asked to dawn the next day. I tried to tell for my aunt, but she laughed, saying it was my imagination of the child. She, I said, but I knew what I felt. And it wasn't normal, for it was getting worse throughout the week. More and more, it seemed that the doll was changing the smile, if made it more crooked, as if it were mocking, and the eyes each time more vivid. I had no idea how to deal. But it was on a stormy night with the rain and the sound of intense roof drops that all happened. I was lying down, but I felt an unnatural cold. I got up with an impression that something was not right. The doll was still on the shelf, but when I threw my look at her, I saw what I didn't want to see. My head was turned toward my eyes, completely focused on me, and the smile still greater. Something told me that she wasn't just watching, she was having fun. With my fear, have no way out. I decided to take the doll from there, she at the bottom of the closet, and closed the door. But that night, the noises. Light noises started, as if something moved inside. I didn't want to look, but I didn't contain myself. Opened the door and there was the doll again on the shelf. But the worst was not even the worst, that she was smiling in that strange way. Even more loaded me. I no longer had peace. As she came back to the shelf, I was sure that I had put it in the back of the closet. I went there. Even shaking, I held her in my hands, was cold. More than should be. The smile now was almost grotesque in the eyes. They aimed in a way I never saw. It was not just a plastic feature. It was almost a look with intention, as if I wanted to understand my dread. I took the bedroom doll and put it away from home, under a tree in the yard. I couldn't take it anymore. That night when I went to bed, the cold came home, apparently closed. It seemed colder than Never, when I lit the lamp, I realized that the doll was right in the center of the room, smiling like that bizarre, as if I liked my despair. My knees trembled. But I don't. I could think the terror right was the size that left me without reaction. The most terrifying was to feel that somehow she was not alone. I started to hear whispers that night. I don't know where they came from, but it looked like weak voices, almost moan ears with their hands. But they didn't stop after that. I never had quiet things. At home, we're changing my aunt, who was calm, started to stay irritation for no reason, claimed that he felt someone piquing her. But not, I understood what happened. I knew I was sure the doll had something more, and now it was influencing no more. Right, sometimes in the middle of dawn. I woke up with a weight in the chest, feeling like the doll is there, looking. And even in the apparent tranquility of the house, the feeling of being watched no longer left me. Finally, my aunt decided to move. She said that the house no longer brought good energy, that something was strange. I never told her about the whispers and the doll for her. Everything was coincidence, but I knew and still know to this day. The worst was not the smile. The worst was not the eyes. The worst was the feeling that the doll had. Open a door for something very dark. Something that will not leave so easily. Something I still feel around me. The sun was gone when she arrived at home. I was about 12 years old, and I lived with my aunt and my cousin in a modest house on the edge of a stream. Was a quiet zone where no one expected anything strange. But that day was different, and it all started that night. My aunt always was reserved and did not talk about the past, said that certain things should staying buried. I never understood well until that she brought that box. Was an old wooden box of those you find at the bottom of the grandmother my aunt had bought in one of these antiquity fairs. She was visibly uncomfortable, but said it was to decorate the room. The box was heavy and had a lock, but my aunt looked, not calling, just asked, not to shy away from what was inside. That was a secret. I didn't. I used to question, but when I saw the fear in her eyes, something told me to stay attentive at first. I thought it was silly, but in second day when I discovered what was in the box, things started to. Strange inside was a very old, ugly wooden puppet with dark eyes and an expression that gave me no comfort. His mouth was crooked, as if he displayed a smile that didn't match the rest of his face. His smell was mold, and the Madeira was so spent that it seemed that I was going to crumble any time I didn't want to have seen. But the curiosity pulled me. My aunt I had put the puppet on the room bookcase, but whenever I spent there, I felt a chill. I started to think, he watched me, but I didn't tell anything. I just was quiet and tried to ignore that feeling of eyes following me. That night when the lights went out, and the house was in the house, that was when things started. I was in the kitchen with my back to the living room, when I heard the noise was not loud, but enough to freeze me. It looked like a lightweight Ranger. Something moving when I looked at the puppet was elsewhere on the shelf. He was no longer where my aunt had left it. Now was later. With my face turned to the room, I was silent, trying to understand. I looked at my cousin, who was on TV far, and I didn't say anything. Was just me, and that feeling that something was very wrong. I tried to convince myself that I might have was my aunt, but could not ignore the fact that the puppet was clearly in a different position. I told my aunt the next day, but she replied that it should be something in my head, that maybe the doll had listed alone, but I knew it wasn't. The next day, I was more attentive. I followed every noise, every creak. When I saw that everything was calm, I started down to the kitchen, but as I passed the room, I stopped the puppet. Sometimes I was no longer on the shelf, was on the floor, leaning against the wall, with the eyes stuck in me. The fear was absurd, was like I was sinking in the dark. I had no reaction, so I ran away to the room. I closed the door and shrunk on the bed, but that impression that he stared at me would not get out of the head from then on. Things. They got worse, and the next morning I woke up with a soft but enough sound to get me up. Was the grinding wood. Knew, looked, and didn't see the puppet on the shelf where it was supposed to be the night before. He appeared in the hallway at the door of my room. I froze. I couldn't associating what was happening. Had no one there, was no logic puppet being in the hall. But the most terrifying is that there were no footprints. There was nothing. Just that object stopped in front of my door, as if I waited. I didn't know what to do. I was looking at the puppet. His eyes seemed more alive than before they were facing me, and judged me, his crooked smile seemed wider, like a disguised threat. I felt I was sinking into the terror in the morning. My aunt acted as if nothing had happened, but I knew what I had seen, so I tried to talk to my cousin. But he didn't take me seriously. Said it was imagination, that the doll was where it always was. But I could swear he moved, or maybe I was going crazy. But in third night, something happened that I will never forget. This time I didn't wake up with noises, but because the light of the hall was lit. I looked at the bedroom door and saw a shadow. The puppet was there again, but it was no longer in the hallway or on the floor on the room table with open hands, as if expecting someone to play. In it gave me a horrible chill. I could not move. My doll now seemed even more alive, and the idea of being observed by something that should not. Having life made me freeze. I couldn't think. I ran to the room again, door in there. I stayed there, but I was never the same, and the following days became increasingly weird. It was not just the fact that the puppet moved alone, was the feeling that he was always there, lurking us, waiting for something. I tried to put him in different places away from me, but with each dawn he reappeared in the same place. The table in the room, the middle of the hallway. Same position. He was watching me one night. I was already exhausted, unable to deal with it. My aunt had left. My cousin went to sleep at a colleague. I decided to face the puppet once and for all. I went to the living room and grabbed the wood. Was cold, and the puppet's smile seemed even more cruel. Then I turned him on my back and put it in the corner of the wall, determined to ignore him. But I was wrong. At dawn the house seemed colder. It wasn't just the breeze out there, was as if something was around every room. I heard something scraping on the floor, and soon I thought of the puppet. I went up the stairs and saw nothing when I returned to the room. There he was at the dining table, but now with his head turned aside, as if I was around something. I didn't see. The dread dominated me. But the worst was to note that when I got close to his expression had changed. The smile. It was more crooked now. It was a malicious smile, as if it was satisfied with what I did. I couldn't stand. I ran out to the room and locked the door. In that night, I didn't sleep, and the next nights the fear only grew. The puppet didn't go back to the box. He started to appear in even weaker places. One night was in the kitchen on top of sink, staring at nothing. In the bathroom on the edge of the bathtub, as if wait for me was. When one dawn I realized that the puppet was now in the window of my room, looking outside, as if I saw something outside waiting for the right time, and I understood that maybe the puppet was not just walking alone, he was driving us. For something we didn't understand. The last night I slept in that house, the puppet. It was more in the window, but in the center of the room there. In the middle of the darkness I heard a light, but very clear laugh, as if someone whisper my name. I passed the door, and the puppet looked at me again, but this time without smiling. It seemed cry. Your eyes full of strange sadness, but at the same time, there was something behind that I didn't understand. I couldn't take it anymore. I dragged the backyard and buried on earth, wishing that it was the end. But when I covered everything, I heard a distant laugh. I didn't see where it came from, but I knew that the puppet had not left, and so the house was never the same. I never came back there, and to this day when I passed near was back. Waiting to be discovered. Was a serene night of September, and the house was quiet. I was there preparing the dinner while my daughter Bianca was playing in the room. She had won a new doll of such a Bartolo type that, say, some programmed lines was not new, that she loved playing doll. But that toy had something uncomfortable, was one of those old dolls with fabric outfit hair, and that in a certain button was talking some pre-recorded phrases used to say silly things like, "Hi, I'm Bia, wants to play." And a few more simple words to entertain child. Was a toy that was already coming with the pile. So I never worried very much. That night, while everything was calm, something happened. Creepy. I was in kitchen stirring in the pan when I heard a voice coming from Bianca's room. I thought it was herself playing, but it was not her voice. Was the doll at first? I supposed it was failure in system, but the feeling of strangeness increased as the phrase was repeated. "I am here, Bianca. I am waiting," was a feminine voice and smooth. but that sounded like whispered exclusively. For my daughter, I was intrigued because I knew the doll was with the batteries almost dead, and yet she had never said something like that. I ran to the room, her already tense, when I entered. Bianca was only there holding the doll as always. But what made me freeze was that the doll kept talking even with the weak batteries. And the worst was not one of the normal phrases. "I'm here, Bianca. I'm waiting at the bottom." I was confused, but I tried to stay. Firmly took the doll and not saying anything to the bathroom to look at the stacks all normal. But the doll seemed to face me on bathroom floor with a strange look. I came back to the room, but that impression that something was out of place chased me to Bianca. Didn't seem to notice anything abnormal. She was quiet as always, but I knew something was very wrong. Could not only be defective the night following. Situation got worse. I tried to rest, but something woke me up at dawn. The sound of a low laugh from Bianca's room. I got up at the same time and ran when I entered. The doll was lying in bed, but now with a weird smile, almost mocking, and the eyes looked alive. Had never seen it before. I approached, feeling a shiver, and went to get the doll. When I touched her again, "You are seeing me, not I can see also. I am not believing in haunting." But at that moment, I was terrified. I had no explanation that I was going on. I held the doll closed in the closet without knowing what to do. But that nuisance only increased. Something told me that this was not common. In the following weeks, the thing worsened. With each night, the doll seemed more alive. I hid it, but always reappeared in another place, first on the Bianca room rug, later in the corridor. Then in the kitchen, in the chair, staring at me in a way that made me shiver. And then she started talking more often. At dawn, when everyone was sleeping, the sentence was clearer. "I can see you," but soon became something more. "Hide you don't," dropped. "And now I'll be here." And the frightening, no one but I listened, was then that a night I woke up with a different noise. The voice of the doll was no longer calm. I was more audible, more full of anger. I got crazy with fear and went to Bianca's room. When I entered, the doll was in the middle of the bedroom. She was not just lying, as she had been before. "You are." Ignoring me, I was talking now with a tone that seemed nauseous, as if I had tired of waiting for me. He gave me a crazy despair, and as the doll spoke, her eyes began to drop. A shine, weak and cold, looked sinister. I had no way to react to grab the doll and stuck it in background of the closet. I knocked the door with all my strength and went to the hallway, shaking in that night. I didn't preach my eye, and it seemed that with every sigh I gave, the doll was more present at dawn. I was exhausted, but I tried to act normally, mainly by cause of Bianca. That did not look strange anything. But I felt that the atmosphere was increasingly loaded. The toy kept watching me. When locked in the closet and the sentences did not give a truce, I heard her voice all night, in distant whispers, as if she was waiting for me after a week of this martyrius. The doll changed again. The voice became even stronger, almost human. She said, "Even in the morning, I said things that froze me. I witnessed," and meaningless phrases, but that shaken me, as if she knew my fears, was like she was chasing me. The worst of all was when, on a stormy night, I decided that it was not enough. It mattered what it was. I had to end her, grabbed the doll. I went to the yard in the rain, the gun strong, and the darkness only lit by the lightning. I shot the doll in a corner near the tree. A momentary relief filled me, but that's when I heard again that soft voice, only now closer. "You think you can leave me?" Like this, the phrase came out. I cleaned. I froze on the spot. I looked around, but there was no one. The wind beating in the trees, and the smell of wet land was strong. I turned to the doll that still was there on the floor now, with a distorted smile, and those eyes were still more alive, staring at me with such intensity that I had to divert. I came home and I locked everything. But while the hours passed, seemed that the house stirred, was not just wind were beaten, as if something wanting to enter, and then heard a laugh from the room spinned through kitchen window. And there was the doll on the porch. I couldn't understand. It had been out there in the rain, but now it was dry. Looking at me, I petrified each time I discarded it again. The feeling of being hunted me, I devoured, and what hurt most was to feel that on some level she knew me well. So the last message that the doll gave me one of these dawn woke me up in shock. The phrase came out, full of a dark weight you will never get. Rid of me, I will remain here forever. After that, my life was never again. Same doll itself may have disappeared, but her presence remains impregnated. It is as if she had left a brand that does not disappear. I turned completely after that, and the torment is not over. Maybe the toy was gone, but the memory stayed, and every once in a while I still hear a low voice in the dark calling me by name. I don't know what is real or illusion anymore, but something tells me I'm not alone. I always thought my cousin had a weird taste for toys. It was silent, but I loved it. Collect puppets. I remember perfectly from the puppet of Bartolo she got as a gift. In 1992, I cannot explain, but I always found that puppet sinister. He had a weird smile and eyes so still that it seemed to watch me. Sometimes I felt that he stared at me, especially when the luminosity of the room was low, but I thought it was my head. But I loved that puppet, always took him here and beyond. I trembled with fear of spending the night in her room because I was leaning against a corner near the window looking at bed. I thought it was just a feeling, but I didn't. I knew that the story behind that object was much more macabre than I could dream of. It all started when my cousin went to a colleague's house and my aunt asked me to check the house. I was 17 years old and didn't care much for her things. But that day, something made me face the puppet of Bartolo de Neer. I was alone in the room, sitting on the couch, and the puppet there with that crooked smile and those real eyes. I remembered rumors that ran around about this kind of puppet, about having a blade inside, something like a dark secret. Many people commented, but I never gave credit. Was legend, and how every legend I thought it was invented. I looked at the puppet and suddenly, the curiosity went to him. I held in the hands and began to examine. The cloth was kind of grimy, and the odor of old vinyl bothered me. Mexi and the head of Bartolo to one side, and the other discovering the mechanism inside. I knew something made him talk, then that I noticed something out of place on the inside. There was a very poorly made sewing, as if was closed in a hurry. I passed my finger and felt the filling more dense than the intricated rest. I took a kitchen knife and started opening that sewing carefully with each cut. I felt a shiver, but I didn't know why. It was just a certain puppet. When the sewing opened, I saw something that shivered me inside. There was not only the void or normal foam, there was something else, something metallic. I pulled the fabric and realized that it was a small dark blade, as if it were a sharp miniature dagger with rust marks and something that seemed rest of dry blood. At first I thought it was a factory defect, but it made no sense. There was no explanation to have it embedded. There was like someone had posting. The blade was fixed on the puppet's body in a very macabre way. And the frightening thing is that the blade does not seem to be there just for ornament. She had marks of use. I turned the puppet and saw that the cloth around was all torn, as if that item tried to let go for a long time. Was when I realized that the puppet that had always been immovable now seemed alive. I looked at the eyes, and for the first time, the smile that once found ridiculous. It seemed wicked. I felt a chill, and then a soft sound. Almost a buzz came from inside the puppet itself. You found my secret. Those words. Me frozen. I didn't know if it was the result of my imagination, but the fear settled. I walked away. I threw the puppet back in the corner, but the dagger inside that everything was much worse than any rumor I had heard before. I reacted the puppet. It seemed to move. That smile seemed to me even wider, as if he prepared for something. I ran to the kitchen and tried to call my cousin, but she didn't answer. I needed to tell someone, but I imagined they wouldn't believe. I tried to leave. The puppet dropped in the room, but whenever I turned my back, he reappeared in another place. One day, he was in balcony, on the other at the kitchen table, as if watching me. I didn't know what to do, chased by something that went beyond the rational. Then I decided to act. I took the puppet. I wrapped in a plastic bag and took even a vacant lot near home. I pledged in it. But before the flames consumed it completely, I saw something that made me shiver. The blade still intact, shined strangely, reflecting the flames, and heard again that buzz. Now you are. Part of me running home, the heart almost exploding that night. I didn't sleep. I heard voices in my head as if the puppet still talked to me. I can't tell if it was true or just paranoia, but after that I didn't see the puppet anymore. I thought I ended him, but was wrong. One day he was back sitting in the bedroom window with the same impossible distorted smile, was the same puppet. Burned parts of the cloth still appeared and the blade inside as if I had never disappeared. I was upset. I ran to the place where I had burned and found no sign of fire, anything like I had never been there. I started to question my sanity until one night I saw the puppet even more terrifying. I was in the bathroom and looking at the mirror behind me, I noticed something almost imperceptible. Was the puppet of Bartolo stopped in the corner, and when I came back to see him, it was there. But in the mirror I was still reflected. I lost my breath and shot without knowing where the fear was. So much that I wandered through the streets aimlessly until I tired me. I no longer knew what was real or not me. I told myself that it could be an outbreak, but it was not long as it was clear that it was deeper, a half, meaning night. I found a guy under a marquise in the city center, seemed a homeless. I approached and asked if he knew something about puppets or supernatural things. He looked at me with a penetrating look, like if he saw my soul, and with a disturbing calm, he said, "This puppet always reappears. No matter what to do is he who decides when and how to show herself listening." And before I asked more, he got up and disappeared on the street dark, as if it were just a mirage. That phrase has hammered in my mind, "He will find you." From then on, I knew it was useless to escape no matter where it was. The puppet, I would be there in the shadows, in the mirrors in each nook. There was no way out. There was no peace. I was being consumed by madness, and each day it was more difficult to distinguish the real from the imagination. My cousin was far away for a while because he went to live with my aunt in a nearby town. But when I returned, I couldn't face it. I didn't have the courage to say nothing. She had been through strange things with toys and did not want. I suffered more. I felt watched even at times, alone trying to sleep, and then, in the darker night I have ever lived, the puppet made his final appearance. There he was before me, like a stain, dense, the fixed eyes, the even bigger smile. This time was not just a cloth and plastic. He looked really alive, possessed by strange energy, and displayed a look of triumph as if he was happy to have taken me to the limit. I don't know what happened next. I don't know how, or if it ended. I only know that since then, my life is no longer. The puppet disappeared, but not the fear that Rhonda every day. And if you hear about Bartolo's puppet, it is better to stay. I have always heard several bizarre stories about those gal dolls, but never. I imagined that we would go through that. I was young, had about 25 years, but my daughter was already 7, lived in the phase of playing all day. She loved that doll, gal that spoke when I pressed the button. I didn't like it much. I found the disturbing toy, but never supposed that things would happen. So strange was a warm late afternoon of these in which the house looks like an oven. And my daughter, I was out there with the doll as always. I was in the kitchen doing dinner, when suddenly the girl ran almost in tears and said, trembling, "Mother, the doll is talking alone." I gave a nervous laugh, thinking it was her thing, but she pulled me by the arm and dragged me to the bedroom. The doll was on the bed, as if someone had put her there carefully, only that she was talking. I repeated a phrase I had never left before: "I will find you. You will not." Hiding from me wasn't a normal message, was the voice of the doll. But different, did not sound like the default phrases. That tone was deeper, more intense at first. I thought it was the end of the stack. But my daughter was shaken, said it was not this, and the tone of the doll became increasingly dark. I felt a chill in the body. Something, I said. I had something very wrong there, and my instinct shouted to stay away. I just wanted her to shut up. After a while the doll was sought, but the feeling of being judged did not disappear. I decided that it was time to act. That was shaking my sanity. The same night after my daughter fell asleep, I took the doll and I took her to the back porch. I had heard of people who burned these dolls when something strange happened. I decided to do this, nothing linked to a curse nearby, and that toy gave me chills, so I took the lighter. I scratched the flame and leaned against the doll, but to my surprise she did not catch fire, or better caught, but the fire went out as if the doll itself repeated the flames. And worse, I had the impression that she moved as if her head wanted to turn around. My tension was 1,000, no longer knew what to do, so I left. The doll out, and I entered. I ran to my room and locked myself. When I dawned, I went to see. And the doll, I was back on the bed of my daughter, intact without a scratch, as if I had never seen fire. Ran to the store where I bought. But the salespeople, they didn't know how to explain anything. I came home more confused, and I could no longer see that toy without feeling chill every time I tried to throw him out. He reappeared until something even more bizarre rolled in that morning after the doll appeared. Again in my daughter's room, I was almost freaking out, trying to convince myself that it was all crazy or nightmare or stress. But what came next proved that something very real was going on. It was Sunday. I sat in the room trying to watch TV when I heard a strange sound coming from the bedroom. My daughter first judged. She went to move, but the sound was different. A scratched as if something was dragged on floor ran there and almost passed out. The doll was no longer in bed. She was on the floor, lying. On the front, as if he looked at me. What he shivered, it was that her mouth was ajar, and a whisper came out softly. I warned you that you would not get rid of me. I was aimed at the idea that the doll moved alone was scary. I tried to think that someone preached a peace, but no one was at home. Only me and my daughter, who was in kitchen taking water every day. It intensified if I tried to get rid of me came back, and with each return, it seemed more present, more living, and increasingly, mine fear grew for several nights. I started to have nightmares and woke up with the certainty that the doll was watching me in the dark. Until one night I decided to put a real end, grabbed the doll with hate and opened her sewing. I wanted to tear any device that made her talk, but what I found was worse than I could suppose. Inside, there was not just plastic, there was something that moved. Was not fabric, was nothing that I recognized. It seemed like an almost alive, dense substance that stirred me when I saw me when I tried to pull that. I felt a strength throwing me back, and then the room darkened everything. And the now empty doll started to release a shine. Pale and cold, I shouted. I jumped away, but it seemed like an intense energy held me. The only thing I heard was the doll releasing a final sentence. Now it was too late. The next day, I woke up as if nothing had happened, and there was the impeccable doll without any cut or brand, as if I had not put the knife once. I realized that this was just the the house was already taken by a strange vibration. Each corner seemed to have a shadow, and every step I took to feel the doll's eyes on me was as if the whole house was full of invisible presences lurking me already. There was no quiet or refuge. The object seemed to have a life of its own and dominated everything around. But the worst was realizing the change in my daughter. She clung more and more to the doll. If she didn't have her in hand, was talking about her, and every day my daughter was more alien, looking at anything with an empty look as if the doll was eye-consuming. I tried to push her away, but she was shouting and clung to the toy, saying that the doll was the best friend, and that everything was well. Tried to bless the house, to talk to older people. It was no use, all the methods failed, and the doll followed in some room, or suddenly watching me, and every invest in mine against her seemed stronger. So one night, I realized that the doll was no longer in my daughter's room, had disappeared. I rolled the whole house, every corner, but nothing. And I didn't know if it was good or if it only came worse. And then I heard that sound, the most sinister laugh that I have ever heard, as if a female voice were muffled. I looked toward the living room and saw the doll sitting on the couch. I don't understood how, but she was there, showing a pure smile, irony, as if it mocked me to know that I would never escape her. And that was the most terrifying, because deep down, I knew the doll had a power over me that was dominating my house and that no longer existed. A way out. She had become part of us, somehow fed on the fear, each attempt to fight the strengthening. Until I no longer had the strength to react, I gave up fighting and accepted that she would be there. This is what happened. What was done from the doll of my daughter and family has become a mystery to this day. Whenever someone appears at home, says she feels her presence near, hidden in some corner. Everyone, without exception, says something observes them as if it were a shadow that no longer drops. I don't try to throw it out anymore, as if in a way she had won, and I had to live with it. After all, the doll does not leave and no one can ever see the same when it looks for her. These reports do not forget the thumbs up who found and subscribed to the channel so as not to lose any history.